So with that, let's get into the tier list for September 2022. So these are all the movies that I saw in theaters. All of them were new with the exception of the re-release for Avatar. So I am including this even though I didn't do an individual review for it. But for all these you can check out the full review on the 2022 movie reviews playlist. But this will just be kind of a brief recap of my thoughts on the film the and what I thought of them. So actually, with that, we got to make an edit here. I'm creating a new category this month, and that's because I've been rethinking my tier system, and there's several things that I can't quite go to the great category on, is what I'm realizing, but I like them better than a B. But it's not one that I say, hey, this is a great movie, go check it out. But it's one that I really liked, and so we're creating this B plus category, which is a good film that I particularly liked and that it had something specially for me. So there were a few of those, and I think I went kind of different directions throughout the month, where I put maybe one or two in the A category and one in the B, and it just made me realize I kind of wanted to have another tier in there. So with that, let's get started. So the first one up is Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. This one was definitely a solid B. It was a good film that was, funny throughout, and I thought had a good story to tell. I don't know that it wasn't quite in the B plus category, but it's a solid film. I recommend checking it out if you're looking for something to watch. Next up, we have Brahmastra Part 1 Shiva. This, again, was a film that wasn't really on my radar, but I saw it was in theaters. What actually put it on my radar was the fact that it was getting released in IMAX 3D. And then when I got to the theater, there was a problem with the projector, so I only saw it in 2D. But it was a fun film. I haven't seen too many of the films that, like, non-English films. So it's movies like this that kind of make me a lot more open to watching them. So it was a little strange seeing like dance numbers interspersed with basically what was a Marvel film, but I thought it worked for the most part and I had a good time. So this again was a B. And if we can just get it to line up, it doesn't like to kind of click into place there. That's okay. So next up we have Barbarian. This was a new horror film. And I'm trying to think where I stood on it. I don't think it was quite to the level of great. I think it was very good. I think it takes a lot for me to say that a horror film was great. But this was definitely a solid B and one that I actually quite enjoyed. So I'm gonna put this one in the B plus category. I just liked some of the things that they did with the movie, and without getting into spoilers, we'll just kind of leave it at that. But I thought it was pretty clever for a horror film. I've been seeing a lot of them lately, so it definitely stood out over many of the others. Next up, we have Medieval. This was definitely just fine. It wasn't bad, but I was thoroughly unimpressed by the film. It's not one that I can say I recommend. We'll just kind of leave it at that. Next up, we have The Woman King. This was a great film. It had me considering putting it in the masterpiece category, but it just, like, thinking of other films that I have in that category, it didn't quite get to that level. But it was a great film. It's one that I think everybody should see, and that's what the A category is. A and above is something that I highly recommend. Even if you're not asking me for recommendations, I'll be like, hey, did you see The Woman King? Because that was a good film. So that, I know I've seen glimpses of the controversy online for it kind of glorifying the real life tribe that they use the name from, but to each their own. I don't really want to get into that. My take on it was, this is a film. It's not being presented as history, and yeah, I just took it as a piece of entertainment. So that is, highly recommend The Woman King. Next up, we have Pearl. This is another horror film, and it's a prequel to X, which came out earlier this year. I liked X a lot more. This was interesting, and I liked that it was fairly different, but I thought it was good. I would maybe put it in the fine category, but what definitely elevates it is the like 9 minute, I think it's 9 minute monologue that the main character has, and I think like at least 5 minutes of it was a single take. So just for that alone, it deserves at least a B. But it was good for a horror film. Next up, we have God's Country. I think I initially gave this one an A, and I think that's before I kind of decided I wanted to create a new category for that. It was B plus, because I think it's movies like this. Although this is borderline great, I thought that Tandy Newton did a phenomenal job acting in it, but it definitely seems like a film a bit more for me, and I kind of while yeah, I think the A category I think is a little more like objectively great and not as reflective of my personal enjoyment for it. So I think my letter grades used to be very subjective in like how I felt coming out of the film, and I think that's good to still have, but for me to call something great, I feel like it needs to be more of a film for everybody that I'd actually recommend and not just recommend to somebody like myself. But this was definitely a B plus. I did really like the film, and it was, I don't know, I liked the mood that it had on the day that I saw it. So it's kind of a yeah, dreary mood of a film, but it hit the spot that day. So next up we have Don't Worry Darling. I thought this was a great film. I know it got lower reviews online, but I thought the acting was really good. The cinematography was good. I liked the story. I liked what we got, and I thought the message of the film was good. So I don't know. I feel like because of everything else that's out there, I shouldn't put it in the A category. But I thought it was great. I stick with that one. That's what I originally gave it, and I think that remains in that category and doesn't just come down to the B plus category. So, Avatar. I did not see this in theaters when it originally released. I think I've seen the film once, maybe twice before, and that was just at home. So I was curious to go check it out in theaters and see how visually stunning it was on the big screen. The times I've seen it at home, I was thoroughly unimpressed by the story, and that remained to be the case. Because of that, it was hard to sit through, but the visuals are really astounding, especially for being a 13-year-old film. Like, the CGI still holds up. The 3D is, like, it's filmed in a way James Cameron actually understands how to make a movie 3D. Like, the action, even like the chase scenes, a lot of times you'll have a chase scene where the camera's behind the person and they're running into the screen. In Avatar, he has the character running out of the screen, and it's little things like that, and a lot of, like, the use of a lot of light and like glass really helps the 3D effect. So for the visuals and for the music especially, James Horner did a phenomenal job with that. I put this into the B category. Without that, it would be a solid C at best. I don't know. I don't think we need the story just isn't all that interesting in my opinion. We don't need more movies that have just a white savior complex, and this just is another movie like that. It's not that it, like, a lot of people are like, oh, like, just because it's been done before doesn't mean it's bad. I'm like, yeah, it's been done before, and it's not all that interesting of a story. So it's the fact that it has been done before and it's not interesting. It's a compound effect there. But to each their own. I'm glad that other people seem to like it a lot more than I do. And I am still curious to check out the sequel. I hope they get a better story. And yeah, we'll see what we get there. But next up we have Moon Age Daydream. That is a documentary about David Bowie, and I knew nothing about David Bowie going in, so it was an interesting film. I enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff that it covered, but it was also paced kind of poorly in my opinion. So it was a B. It was good. Not like I wouldn't say go out of your way to see it, but I thought it's worth the watch if you're looking for something to see. Next up, we have Confess Fletch. This again was a solid B. I actually really liked it. I think I initially gave it an A because I really liked the film. It was a lot of fun. I didn't really see any problems with it, but returning to this new ranking system, it's certainly not a great film. It just didn't do enough to get to that level, but it's one that I enjoyed, I think, a lot more than most, and it's solidly in that B plus category for me. See How They Run. This was a murder mystery that I thought was very run-of-the-mill. It was fine at the end of the day. It's not one that I'd recommend. I was pretty bored by it and not really invested, unfortunate to say. The Good House. This was a good film. I think I gave it a B, and I think that's when I had like around that time. I think it was between like See How They Run and The Good Place that I decided I wanted to get a B plus category because I'm like, I know I gave Confess Fletch an A, but I really like thinking back, it really wasn't an A, but it's not also not quite a B. And so the Good House is another film like that where I think it's a solid B. The acting's good, the story's good. It doesn't quite do anything to get to the level of great, but I really liked it. Next up we have Smile. This was good for a horror film. I give it a solid B. I'm not huge on horror, so it's hard for a horror film to get into the B plus category. Like the fact that Barbarian is there, I think says a lot. But it's not bad. I thought there were several interesting things that the film did, and yeah, I think it made some interesting choices that worked for me, but they may not work for everybody. Next up, we have Bros. This is just it's a rom-com that I thought was a solid rom-com. I don't think it reinvented the wheel on what a rom-com is. I think it's good to get rom-coms not just about heterosexual couples. So that I thought was good, but kind of taking that out of it and judging it on its merits as a rom-com, I thought it was good. It didn't stand out to me like some of the others that we have. Like I think some of my favorite rom-coms, or like earlier this year we had The Lost City. That's kind of a rom-com, but that was just a ton of fun. So this was fun, but it certainly it didn't appeal to me a ton personally, although I felt like I could relate a lot with the main character. But it was an enjoyable time, and there's nothing wrong with that. I recommend it if you're looking for something to watch, but it didn't blow my socks off either. So, and then on the come up, I just saw this today actually, so this is pretty fresh in my mind. And this one's again a solid B, and I thought it did a lot or it was just a good film that held my interest. Again, didn't do quite enough to get into the great category, and yeah, it's one I'd recommend if you're looking for something to watch. So I thought it was, I don't know, it was the sort of film that I liked. It has a lot more kind of serious subject matter and a little bit heavier of a film again. So like some of the others on this list, but I thought overall pretty good month for movies. I think the last month or two we've had a lot in like the B and C category, so only having a couple C's I think is good. I like most movies. I wouldn't have a movie like a YouTube channel if I didn't like movies, so it's most things are going to get into the B category, and then it takes a lot for it to just lose all my interest to go down to a C, but it takes quite a bit as well to bump up to the B plus and especially the A category. And masterpieces, those we don't get all that often, so I think a solid month for movies. I liked quite a bit of what we got, and we'll see what the next month has in store.